The moment was almost unbearable. The small cafe was bustling with the usual morning rush baristas shouting out orders, the hiss of steaming milk, the clatter of ceramic mugs against counters. But for Mara, the deaf woman standing at the edge of the line, every sound felt like a heavy wall she could not climb. Her hands fidgeted nervously as she stared at the menu, its colorful illustration mocking her, the words jumbling into indecipherable symbols in her mind. She had walked into the cafe wanting nothing more than a simple cup of coffee, but now surrounded by the hum of life she could not hear, her heart pounded and her chest tightened. The line inched forward, and she could feel eyes brushing against her, subtle impatience hidden behind polite smiles. Mara knew what they were thinking. Why can't she just order? Why is she standing there like that? She lifted her hand slightly, ready to try writing her order on the small notepad she always carried. But as she fumbled with the pen, a wave of anxiety swept through her. Sometimes people didn't understand, and she'd leave embarrassed, empty-handed. Other times, they tried to guess her order without listening, assuming too much. Every failed interaction had left a scar, and today felt like another reminder of how isolating the world could be when your ears refused to cooperate. Mara's eyes darted toward the glass window, watching the golden sunlight spill over the city sidewalk, wishing she could vanish into the brightness outside. If you believe in the quiet power of kindness and second chances, please pause for a moment. Like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Kindness Spark. Every small gesture can make a world of difference. The moment of despair was interrupted by a small, tentative tap on her shoulder. She turned slowly, her fingers tightening around her notepad, expecting either a rush of annoyance or the cold, hurried judgment of a stranger. Instead, she met the warm, earnest gaze of a man who seemed completely unbothered by the chaos surrounding them. He was about her age, perhaps a little older, with tousled brown hair and deep, kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. His name, she would soon learn, was Nathan. He crouched slightly to meet her at eye level and slid a small folded piece of paper toward her. Mara blinked, confused at first. The cafe had no chalkboards or notes for customers. Tentatively, she unfolded the paper. There, in neat, deliberate handwriting, were the words, "Hi, I can help you. What would you like? Take your time, no rush." Something in Mara's chest lifted, an unfamiliar warmth blooming across her ribs. A stranger, a parent, someone whose hands she would later notice were strong yet gentle from hours of caring for another human being, had taken the time to communicate in a way she could understand. She hesitated, then scribbled her order. "Large latte, almond milk, no sugar, please." She handed the note back, and Nathan's smile widened, accompanied by a soft nod that made her heart beat a little faster. It wasn't just coffee. It was a bridge, a connection in a world that often ignored the silent. Nathan stepped aside, giving her space, and when the barista handed her the steaming cup, Mara felt as if she had been handed a small miracle. She couldn't explain why a simple act of writing words on paper felt so monumental, but it did. As she moved to a quiet corner of the cafe, stirring her latte gently, her eyes kept returning to Nathan. He was no ordinary stranger. Behind him, a small boy, probably around 7 years old, clutched a worn superhero backpack and watched the world with wide, observant eyes. Mara noticed how Nathan's attention alternated between the boy and helping her, and it struck her how effortless his kindness seemed, as though it was stitched into the very fabric of who he was. She realized in that moment that life, even in its smallest acts, could surprise you, could remind you that empathy and patience were never out of style. Nathan moved to the counter to pay, glancing back at Mara before leaving, and their eyes met again. She nodded slightly, a gesture that felt like a language only they could understand. Mara took a sip of her latte, and the rich warmth spread through her chest, anchoring her to a sense of safety she hadn't felt in a long time. The cafe noises, once intimidating, now felt like a distant melody, the kind that accompanies quiet triumphs. Days turned into weeks, and Mara found herself returning to the same cafe almost daily. Sometimes Nathan and his son, Eli, would be there, and she discovered a rhythm in these encounters. The interactions began, small notes passed back and forth, smiles shared, gestures of mutual understanding. But they carried a depth Mara hadn't anticipated. She learned that Nathan was a single dad, balancing his job as a nurse with the responsibility of raising Eli after his wife had passed years ago. Mara couldn't help but feel a profound respect for the way he managed exhaustion, fear, and love all at once, always ensuring Eli felt seen and valued. One morning, the cafe was quieter than usual, sunlight streaming through the windows in sharp golden rays that cast long, soft shadows across the floor. Mara arrived just as Nathan and Eli were finishing their breakfast. This time, Mara decided to do something different. She had brought her own notebook and pen, something she rarely did for anyone except herself. When she approached Nathan, Eli's curious gaze following her, Mara hesitated, then wrote a simple message: "Thank you. You make mornings brighter." Nathan's eyes softened, and he crouched down to Eli's height, gesturing toward Mara. He read the note aloud in a voice Eli could hear, careful to emphasize the words with warmth. Eli's face lit up in recognition of the unspoken bonds forming between them, and Nathan nodded at Mara, his smile conveying more than words ever could. Mara felt tears prick her eyes, not of sadness, but of an emotion she didn't have a word for: gratitude, hope, and the quiet affirmation that connection, even in its smallest forms, could be transformative. It wasn't just about coffee anymore. It was about recognition, about the human need to be seen and understood. Mara thought about all the mornings she had walked into cafes, unsure if she would be met with patience or judgment. Now she understood that patience could be taught, yes, but sometimes it could also be found in the unlikeliest of strangers, and that recognition could be as simple as a pen and paper, a smile, or a gentle glance. One day, Nathan and Mara found themselves waiting in line together when the cafe experienced a sudden rush. The baristas were flustered, orders spilling over each other, and Mara instinctively pulled out her notebook, ready to communicate efficiently. Nathan, sensing her hesitation, smiled and wrote a note for her. "We've got this together." Mara's heart lifted, and she realized that trust, too, could be written in ink and passed silently across a counter. Eli giggled at their shared secret exchange, and the moment felt so intimate, so complete, human, that Mara almost forgot the rest of the world existed outside those walls. Time, as it always does, moved forward. Mara and Nathan's friendship deepened, built not on spoken words but on shared experiences, written notes, and gestures that spoke louder than any voice. Mara learned about Nathan's dreams of volunteering more at community centers, about Eli's love for drawing superheroes, and about the quiet resilience that held both father and son together. In return, Nathan learned about Mara's passions, photography, books, and her unique ability to notice details that most people overlooked. Their worlds, once parallel, now intersected in unexpected ways, bringing warmth and light to spaces that had been cold and silent. Then came a day when Mara realized that her anxiety, the tight knot she had always carried at the thought of ordering coffee, had begun to unravel. She approached the counter alone, the sun spilling through the window in the early afternoon, and wrote her order confidently on her notepad. As she handed it to the barista, she noticed a small, approving nod. Mara smiled, a full, radiant smile that felt as if it came from deep within her bones. In that instant, she understood something profound. Progress isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, small and nearly invisible, but it leaves an indelible mark on the soul. Nathan noticed the change too. He slid a note toward her that said, "Simply, I'm proud of you." Mara's eyes misted as she read it. Eli clapped softly, a small, heartfelt gesture that seemed to echo the significance of the moment. The three of them, strangers who had become a little family, shared a quiet, magical understanding, a recognition of the beauty in patience, empathy, and human connection. Mara took a deep breath, lifting her latte to her lips, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like the world was too loud, too fast, or too unattainable. She felt seen, she felt safe, and most importantly, she felt that a single act of kindness, extended without expectation or hesitation, could ripple outward in ways she had never imagined. As the sunlight continued to stream across the cafe, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air, Mara realized that sometimes the simplest gestures carry the heaviest weight. A folded note, a patient smile, or a moment of genuine care could shift the trajectory of someone's day or even their life. And in that small cafe, on that ordinary morning, Mara, Nathan, and Eli had created something extraordinary, a connection that transcended noise, barriers, and fear. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of patience and human kindness, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement spreads hope and reminds us all that even small gestures can change lives.